Post high school, I did a pretty traditional route. I went and studied at Victoria University. I went there to study business and law, so it was a great time. Threw up some different challenges. Proud of my past there. I travelled to India, did a 3-month tour there, studying at Centurion University, so I had a great time there and learned a lot about myself. No hot water, curry 3 times a day, so that was certainly an experience. And then I did a year in about 7 months in New Jersey. I studied abroad there as well. So that was a great opportunity and sort of led me actually to sort of what I do today. And yeah, with the whole side of fashion and culture there. Yeah, so that was sort of my route out of school.
Did you always have like a passion in streetwear?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just, bouncing off a few friends, and I think just being around the schoolyard and seeing everyone wear like different shoes and just being really fascinated. I think it started definitely with shoes. I mean, pretty funny era to grow up. I can remember just sitting on like an iPad Generation 1 and just swiping through eBay, just most like math classes. So probably shouldn't say this in a Caulfield Grammarian interview, but yeah, so sorry to all those Year 7 teachers, but yeah, just at the back of the class, and you get given an iPad and such. So it was a pretty amazing time to grow up and look at fashion on the internet, really. I think there's no bigger risk than time, to be honest. It's sort of like life's an opportunity cost. If you do one thing, you're missing out on another thing. So there's always that, how much, because you have to dedicate a lot of time. I think that's sort of my main mantra is, if you're going to do something, you do it properly. So you're inevitably going to be very nervous because you have to make sacrifices and your schedule's going to change. And as we're habitual creatures, we just like doing what we're used to. So I guess just shifting into something that was a big unknown for me, and my first proper business venture was certainly nerve-wracking, but I'm certainly glad I did it. The challenges early days, I mean, I think you're challenged every day, and it's sort of it's almost. It's one of the great things is, when you challenge, you're learning the most. So challenges just from every angle. I don't know where to begin, really. Just from things like registering your business, which thankfully I did study business at university, so I had some form of background, but I think there's definitely no comparison to actually starting a business, and I think most people give you that advice. So yeah, I think just the general in and out of communicating, and I think, yeah, really simple things that sound almost cliche, but communicating really effectively with people and telling them, what your motives are, why you're doing something, and with colleagues and then with, say, clients and things like that. And it was just, yeah, a lot of learning curves. And I think just sticking to structures, coming back to being habitual creatures, the better habits you can sort of implement, the better off you'll be without having to, you're still always going to face challenges, no matter what you're doing now, no matter how great your habits are. But if you can form some really good habits that are predictable and you become in sync, that's sort of how I find to best navigate. Biggest difference, yeah, you can't really compare. So I almost sort of regret saying that university prepared me for my business. It's just not the case. There's just certain things, sort of rudimental things like putting in an ABN and a domain name and things like that. But the reality is there's just things you can never predict that are going to happen, for better or for worse, and you just have to. You most likely have no blueprint. A great quote, I'm going to have to go off the top of my head here, but Joseph Campbell said, if you're following someone else's path, if your path is clear, you're probably following someone else's path. And I sort of like that because although, you want to cry out for a mentor sometimes, but I think, when you're following a path, when you're really unsure and there's a lot of unknowns, that's when you're going to grow the most. So it's that typical dichotomy is, when you're most nervous, most scared, sort of with all the apprehension, that's when you're really going to, catapult up and start to move forward. Yeah, definitely. Family members, friends, yeah, certainly. Still today, absolutely. I think Melbourne is very conservative. Australia is a conservative country, founded when some the 1900s, and the convicts and all those cliches get thrown around. So yeah, I think looking at all my friends and family that have gone into creative industries, I've seen that happen for them too. It was something, I was aware of, but it's definitely, again, like, you don't know until you do it. And, especially after I finished a 5-year degree with a $60,000 HECS debt, it was certainly asking some questions. But you know, I think one thing I could, you know, to appease, I guess, my parents, which is whatever, but they were, you know, I went into a business, I studied business. So, yeah, I just think you got to just, I think that's like the first hurdle. Getting, you know, your family, friends and outside people question what you're doing and why you're doing it. That's inevitably going to happen. So be ready for that. And if you're serious and love what you do, you'll overcome that pretty quickly. Yeah, there was an element of that. We were just so motivated, I guess. It sounds a little bit of a cliche, but we'd go to like a market, like a Camberwell market, and just literally just be out there on the coalface and try to sell like a t-shirt for $10, $20 and just get it out and get people wearing it. And it's funny, I'll have people contact me today and be like, oh, I remember you, like 2.5 years ago at Camberwell Market, and I bought that like t-shirt you screen printed the night before that was, you know, whatever, it's not the greatest job because like we probably bought that screen printer on eBay and we're just learning. But I think that is like, that's beautiful as well, you know, just trying and pushing at that early stage. I think that's a big piece of advice I like to give to people is, a lot of people try start a business with like a beautiful sort of like sculpted thing, but it's never going to be the case, you know, especially if you're just starting off into the unknown, which is sort of how you should do it if you really want to learn and grow. Where you start is just your starting point, and then you look back 6 months in a year and you're proud and you've grown. So don't think that from the very get-go that you have to have some amazing product that you take a year to build. Just get out there and start learning. The surprise probably comes from the amount of learning, to be honest. I studied for 5 years, you know, sort of traveled the whole world with that, and I thought I definitely learned a lot through that, but running your own business is like nothing else. Like every day's a restart, I find. No matter how well we've gone with, say, a certain sale or a drop, anything can happen at any moment, whether that's positive or negative. Like, we've had, you know, certain companies reach out and it's like an unbelievable moment. Then we've had, you know, really negative things happen from, say, a production standpoint or whatever it may be. So it's just, yeah, it's just being on your toes, I guess, coming back to sticking to your structures and what you know works, because in times of uncertainty it can get, you know, we don't really have a roadmap, being such a young company. So we just have to stick to what we know and what's worked in the past. Yeah, I also think maybe not being afraid to take risks is really important too, and just learning from that. Sort of, we have a saying that failure is our best friend, because I like to say he's our annoying best friend, because like you sort of love him but hate him. Like when it comes, it's like I hate you, but then after you've learned his messages and why he's there, or he or she, then you know you're really happy about why that happened, and you almost never change it. So, what advice would I give? I think just start, you know, it kind of ties back into what I was saying before. It's don't get so hung up on, you know, your business having to be the best business from day one, because it's, you know, vast majority of the time won't be, you know, highly unlikely. So just start. And I think there's another great quote I heard when something along the lines of this. It's like, in fact, I probably won't get the quote right, but the main meaning of the quote is like, when you hear birds singing every day, like they don't care who's listening. So, you know, start doing your thing and don't worry too much about what others think. I think that fear is definitely something that it holds people back. And, you know, if you come from sort of a rather entitled, privileged social circle, that noise is pretty loud and people have pretty strong opinions, and that's fine, you know. But I think just take risks, and it's a special thing, and yeah, you just put one foot forward, literally, and time moves so fast that it's I think just speak less and like do more, like with your actions, probably this, to put it simply. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so our 4 principles, hopefully I'll get them right without having to turn around. But the first one's positivity. So I guess if you're not positive, things can get pretty dire pretty quickly, we found. So there's going to be ups and downs. So you've just got to stay as balanced as you can. You know, sometimes things are going really well and it's easy to stay positive. Last night was a good example. We had a really great release and everyone was very receptive, and so that, like, we're super proud of that. But there's also moments where that's not the case. So you have to learn from that and move on. We have this thing called the triple C's. That's confidence, communication, and I get stuck on this third one, so I'm going to quickly look. That's consistency. Need to be more consistent. So yeah, the triple C's, they're also just as big. So communication, as I said at the start of this interview, is everything. Like, you know, your life's sort of dictated by the quality of your communication, I think. if you struggle to communicate with people, you're going to be finding yourself in some sticky situations. So yeah, get good at communicating. Confidence sort of ties into positivity, just, you know, really believing in what you do, the amount of work you put in. We know the amount of work we put in, and that's in such a diverse way. That's, you know, talking to people all the time. And I think the main thing about our business that I haven't really touched on is we really are trying to create a community and something different. I think, as I touched on, Australia's a little bit conservative, and people, it's still evolving. I really find we're like a younger brother to the rest of the world, being at, say, you know, 20 to 25 million population. It's such a raw country, as opposed to, you know, America at 350 to 400 million, and Europe, and the list goes on. So I know we're at our sort of infant stages, and you look at things through like our sporting like sector, our music scene, and our fashion scene, and just all the arts. Like, it is really evolving and growing. So I guess we're just trying to be trailblazers and pioneers, which ties us in, there we go, bang, into our third principle. So being pioneers is really important to us, because we know what we do isn't very conventional. We do things very, you know, oddly, and I think that's sort of why we have this like cult following. I think some people come up to us and get really, I've spoke to other business owners, like, we just don't get it. Like, how do you have all these people like that, you know, buy every single thing you do, or come to every single event, or respond to every message you put out? I think that's just by being pioneers and just sort of leading a space that is sort of unpaved. Like, the waters, it's almost like, I've read a little bit of Moby Dick, and like, we're going through some uncharted waters right now. So yeah, just being trailblazers in that regard, and role models. That's the other thing we put up there. We want to really set the best standard we can. And that's in a lot of different areas. Yeah, so that really ties into why we've had various interns under the age of 18 that are still at school come through the business. We get probably a message a week from someone who's doing work experience. We've done 2 RMIT lectures. We're doing one today, actually. Yeah, so, and those have been increasing. So sort of as we've been growing and sort of communicating better, we've just been, I guess, giving more advice and just, yeah, and which is great. And that's sort of that's why it's one of our 4 principles is we want to help people learn and grow. We're going to continue to do that. And that's why I'm, you know, really thankful that I've been able to do this interview as well. And hopefully anyone that listens to it can reach out if they have any more questions. And just to finalise, yeah, in sync. So we, just that sort of camaraderie, chemistry, whatever you want to call it, just being really in sync with your team, with what you're trying to do. If someone, and that can be very volatile, because someone might have had a bad night's sleep, they might have had a family member get sick, any host of things can occur. And if you're not aware of those things and you're just thinking that they're, you know, average happy person, then that's when, you know, you can really fall out of sync and arguments can occur. And so you just have to be really aware of how the person is and, you know, how their life's occurring. So yeah, that's our 4 principles. Yeah, certainly. All the time. I mean, there's moments in every day that probably don't go to plan, to be honest. But yeah, I guess like generally like a really bad day. Yeah, I'm very open. Like, we've had plenty of arguments, some more differing in scale than others. But I think we actually do get stronger after them, thankfully. we sort of rekindle. And I like to actually speak about our business as like a basketball team, because there's 3 of us. A basketball team has 5 sort of players on a court, and each basketball player on a court does something different. So you have like a really tall guy that's a center that grabs, you know, predominantly rebounds. Your really small guy's probably going to be a point guard that passes the ball. So they all have different roles within the game, and I see that in our business too. You know, whether it's me being sort of looking into marketing and communicating with a lot of different people, and whether it's our designer who's a bit, you know, who probably prefers to be behind the iPad and designing our new collection, and everyone's roles are different, and we have to respect that, understand it, and that's how great any team, if it's a basketball team or a business, is going to work. You know, have that respect and understanding, and then just go to work on your, just know your structure and just implement it. Yeah. Again, time back into planning, we like to just really go day by day, like, you know, a few months in advance, and really break it down where events are and allocate, you know, the specific time. And with like clothing products, it depends. Sometimes we'll shoot 5 models in a range of clothes, and then sort of give it like a month campaign, and then sometimes we'll release something within 3 days. So it does vary, and it depends. I think a big thing in the fashion industry, and I guess any creative industry, is momentum. And I think we've really been building on that. So momentum sort of dictates a lot of how you plan things and, what people, in our case, it's clothing. So what clothing that they're really receptive to and probably going to purchase. And that'll really dictate our planning. We like to stay about 3 to 5 months ahead in the year. And hopefully as we get more and more sufficient, cohesive as a group, we can plan out longer ahead. But I mean, there's no greater year than 2020 or even 2021 now to sort of throw those things up. So that's what it is though. Yeah, we've done various collaborations. Some of sort of the noteworthy ones, we've collaborated with YAAP, the frozen yogurt brand, which was really interesting and I think really up our sort of quirky line. As we're trying to be pioneers and sort of just breaking sort of conservative molds. So yeah, people I think were very perplexed when we were like, not sure how fashion ties into frozen yogurt, but we made it happen. I think we had about 300-400 people attend to the event. So I guess, we did some smiley face cookies and handed out 200 free tote bags and sort of gave back. We really love giving back to the community. We've been really well supported and received, and people always reaching out, whether it's purchasing or just showing appreciation to what we do, and any chance we get to physically give back, not just say thank you on like an Instagram story that seems somewhat shallow or superficial. We like to really, tangibly give back. That was with YAAP. We do have another collaboration which is pending with Hawker Hall on Chapel Street. Yeah, so that will 99.9% go ahead, just depending on COVID and the recent sort of restrictions that we have, but that's in the next month, so hopefully that'll go ahead soon. Definitely, yeah, I'd love to be in America. I think, I guess the best sort of story I can give about America and how it's so different to Australia is, you'll wear a certain brand in America and you'll have people stop in the street, complete randoms. Like I've had hugs, I've had people come right to my face and appreciate like what I'm wearing, and it's so different, and America's got a lot of pros and cons, but there is a real acceptance and a real energy around sort of culture and community in certain aspects that I don't think Australia fully has adopted. So that's certainly something I've tried to bring back. There's definitely a few key brands as well in America that we've really emulated. I think it all revolves around a thing of sort of energy, and I think that's what our brand does so well, and that's why the community's again very receptive of what we do, because our energy is very high. We're very, I don't think we value anyone, whether you're our next collaboration CEO of a big business or whether you're a young 15-year-old kid trying to buy a hoodie. We don't value people differently. We try to just respect them the same, and that's typically how we act. Yeah, I think fashion sustainability is like a very, very taboo subject, I believe. I think typically starting a clothing brand's probably like the least sustainable thing you could ever do, because everyone owns a lot of clothes. So I don't want to preach to the audience that we're this ultimately sustainable brand. We do try to take measures, but as I said, innately what we do isn't very sustainable for the environment. But with that said, there is measures. So we do want to go overseas, whether that is to, from what I've heard, Malaysia definitely has some great practices in terms of very ethical, like working conditions, family businesses and that type of thing. So I'd love to go meet the factory owners and really understand where our clothing gets sourced from, who's working on the front line, what wages they're paid. So that's something, fingers crossed, we can go do in the next few years. I'm sure everyone's got a plan to travel internationally. That's probably one of ours. Yeah, I mean, in the fashion industry, I would sort of, it's definitely, elements of like fast fashion we try. Our drops are very limited, so often people come onto our website and there's nothing on there, and that's probably 90% of the time, because we drop probably once every 2 to 3 weeks for about an hour to 3 hours, and that's it. So that is definitely an ethical sort of approach, sustainable approach, because we're not just selling large quantities of things. But with that said, I think if I want to see a change in the industry, I think it's just an acceptance for people, for creatives, and it sounds very broad what I'm saying, but just valuing people, and you never know where they're going to end up. So 15-year-old kids that may seem a little bit annoying when some of these kids have my phone numbers and my emails, and I receive numerous amounts of things, and it might get under my skin sometimes. But giving back, and you never know, and you don't give back to to receive, but you'd be very surprised when you give back how much you see back. And when we give away 200 tote bags that cost us, a fair bit of money, and we talk to our accountant and they don't like that we do those things, but we do see it always come back a lot heavier in support, whether that's purchasing or whether that's attending to events or just spreading the word of how great our brand is. So just give, I guess. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think sort of with like the power of social media, every day your voice is sort of heard. And I think with our business, as we are trying to be pioneers, we're trying to have a voice and speak up. And not just on fashion. Another thing we're very proud of as a business, we've donated, I believe, upwards of $1,500 to the Children's Ground Foundation, which is a great Indigenous Australian foundation. They're making a lot of positive change, especially with youth, and studying a lot of Indigenous subjects at university really raised my awareness of like the cultural issues that are going on there. And this is a foundation I've found that's really starting from the grassroots and making a difference. So we've been supporting them for the last few years, and that's just been great for us, and hopefully we continue to do that. I know we will. But yeah, back to the question, do you mind just going in?
How you go about getting your voice heard as a young professional?
A voice heard, I mean, just being honest and like your honest self, and I think, yeah, I guess it comes back to that fear thing. Don't just be you, and if others are gonna, I think something I've learned is that if others react to you being your honest self, then that says a lot more about them. I mean, sometimes you think you get a little, maybe upset or whatever those emotions are, they sort of creep in, but the reality is if you're just being who you are, then others are going to do what they do, and that's fine too. But don't let that affect you. It sort of ties back into that bird quote, like sing like a bird, because they don't really care who's listening.
So what brands inspire you, and where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years?
Good questions. So the brands that inspire us, the main brand is a Brooklyn-based brand, and it's called Kid Super. It's run by an individual who's the face of the brand, and he's very, very out there in terms of just embracing all elements. To give you an example, he'll put out in social media, does anyone have a rug, like a certain rug, and then if someone comes in, he'll work with that person on like cutting up that rug and turning it into, say, like a dress. And he's always just bringing in random people, and he always has time for people, and he works extremely hard. So I think I was fortunate enough to meet him, albeit at a very random place at a very late time of night in Brooklyn. But I guess that's case in point right there. I was in America for 3 weeks and I got to meet him. So it's being very accessible and open for people, and we don't want to be, as we grow as a brand, we're not trying to become more pretentious or sort of change our messages. It all stays the same, and hopefully we can keep sort of like pleasing people. And yeah, 10 years. We're doing well to plan 3 to 5 months ahead, but 5 to 10 years. Well, we have some pretty sort of long goals, and some of those are certainly to be running pop-ups and if not permanent stores in New York. Milan would be great. Sydney, hopefully a lot sooner than 5 or 10 years, but that's another one, probably 1 to 2 years, I'd say. I think for me, traveling to America so often and knowing the community and culture that's there, I'm hoping we can thrive there. But that would be some of those long-term goals. Yeah, definitely venturing out internationally. I've also gone on record to say we want to run a festival. It's sort of scary knowing how much work would be involved in that, but I guess I'll put it out there. Other goals, it sounds this very cliche, but like just to be us in 5 or 10 years, how far we've grown. I can imagine at the rate we're going, we might be in a bigger space, or we might be doing bigger tasks or collaborating with bigger companies, but just continue to be our authentic self, and knowing where we started at the markets, being those same kids that were selling $10 t-shirts, and we don't need to change too much from that, because that's why we're here and that's why we'll be where we are in 5 or 10 years. Yeah, that's something we've really focused on the last few months, is really trying to nail in almost like a school, like 6 periods, or channeling that type of timetable. because although, you know, we're not always completely stringent to that, because that's just life, you know, whether there's numerous things that can pop up during a week, of course. But I think with our structure, if we don't try keep to something, then that's when you really find you sort of digress and get really far away from what you're trying to do, because you know, one thing leads to another. But if you sort of have a semi-set structure, you always know, you know, where you're almost going. If you go over time, you know, it's not like, say, you're doing a PE class and you don't go to maths. I don't even know what metaphor I'm going with there, so I'll scrap that. that's a complicated one. But yeah, like you can go overtime with tasks and things. That's fine. And you know, certain days you might be like, we like to chunk. We have like a social media planning session every day, and we have a clothing planning session. We might be really far ahead with our clothing. Like we've got all the clothing bought, screen printed, embroidered, whatever it may be. It's on its way. We have no problems with that. But the social media side of things, we might, you know, have like no models lined up, perhaps no shooting locations or whatever it may be. So we'll dedicate probably majority of the planning to that side. So normally one side's sort of lacking in terms of like, you know, the effort, and yeah, it's just a lot of effort. But I guess when you start to see the results and you know it works, then you sort of just go from there, I guess.